I quickly want to cut across to 7 Kautilya Marg, residence of Marshal of the Indian Air Force, Arjan Singh. This is a tri-services guard that has been lined up outside his house. His mortal remains will now be taken to the Brar Square cremation ground with full military honors. That's the Air Force band you see on display. There is a gun carriage. This is the highest honor that can be given to a soldier, to an air warrior. In this case, that his mortal remains are carried on a gun, on a cannon. The gun carriage will travel through the Sardar Patel Marg to Delhi cantonment. Presently, what you see on your television screens is Shok Shastra, or inverted arms. This is soldiers mourning a fallen comrade. But after the last post is the rouse. While they pay homage to the brave who has fallen, they always rise once again, and that is to fight another battle. This is the 7A Kautilya Marg, residence of the Marshal of the Indian Air Force. Fly in peace, Marshal. The young man who started his flying career with then Royal Indian Air Force in the Northwest Frontier Province, currently a part of Pakistan. He flew as part of the Royal Indian Air Force, and then in the 1940s, in the Second World War, he distinguished himself flying the Hurricanes in the Burma theatre. The man you see on your television screen, Arjan Singh, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his superb flying and the brilliant air warrior that he was. At the age of 44, let's listen in now to the rouse that will be sounded. Sir, chal! Please. भाई साहब थोड़ा सा Right behind the army truck is a 105 mm field gun. On the field gun is that gun carriage, his mortal remains on that. They will now be taken to the Brar Square cremation ground. There, with full military honors and a 21-gun salute, his mortal remains will be consigned to flames. The Indian Air Force will then fly. There will be a fly past in the missing man formation. Each time a soldier falls, an air warrior falls, the Indian Air Force flies the missing man formation. That signifies we miss you, but our mission continues to protect our skies and to continue in that path to touch the sky with glory. That is the motto of the Indian Air Force. Nabha Sparsham Deeptam. I had interviewed the Marshal of the Indian Air Force in 2002 when he'd taken over as the Marshal, and then he'd spoken of the 1965 war. His finest hour as a commander, as a leader. At the young age of 44, he commanded, he became the chief of the air staff, and he led the Indian Air Force to victory against Pakistan. Pakistan that attacked India, that was threatening to cut off Jammu and Kashmir. And as Marshal of the Indian Air Force, Arjan Singh told me in that exclusive interview that had it not been for the Indian Air Force, we would have lost Jammu and Kashmir in 1965. The popular perception was that Indian Air Force did not perform well in 65 war. I asked him, he said, all these years I have been depressed because of this so-called popular perception that the Indian Air Force did not perform well. He then gave me statistics. He said the Indian Air Force destroyed 123 Pakistani tanks. The Indian Air Force destroyed 72 Pakistani ammunition-laden trains, while Pakistan Air Force was able to destroy only 3 Indian tanks. Pakistani Air Force succeeded in destroying none of our ammunition trains. Indian Air Force inflicted much more damage on the Pakistan Air Force and on Pakistan Army than they did on ours. He of course did have a chip on his shoulder saying that the army had taken the credit for the victory and blamed the Air Force for the setbacks, but it was the air warfare that was the decisive factor. He conceded there were initial losses, but Pakistan's attrition rate was 1.5 times higher. There you see army soldiers and air warriors sit by that gun carriage, and these are troops of the army who will now march, get into their vehicles and then go here from Kautilya Marg to Brar Square, where a 21-gun salute, and then his mortal remains will be consigned to flames. These are troops of various battalions of the Indian Army that are posted in Delhi. Senior commanders of the Indian Army, Indian Navy and the Air Force, they will be present. The 3 services chiefs are likely to be present at the Brar Square cremation ground for the last rites of the legend. Indian Air Force's only 5-star general, Marshal of the Indian Air Force. He also spoke and he was very candid. He was completely unafraid when asked about the setbacks that the Indian Air Force had received in the Eastern Theatre in Kalaikunda and also of course in the Western Theatre in Pathankot. He said that there were setbacks, but that was because of the weakness of the local leadership. All of 5 minutes warning that was available at that point of time. Only 2 minutes time the Indian Air Force had taken to launch a very swift counter-attack. And there you see his mortal remains now being driven down Sardar Patel Marg in New Delhi. A fitting farewell to a legend. What was also remarkable was the fact that Indian Air Force still had old aircraft. Indian Air Force was still flying old aircraft. The Pakistanis had the latest Sabre jets, and despite the Pakistanis having Sabre jets and foreigners flying for Pakistan Air Force, the Indian Air Force won the air war. Some say it was a stalemate, but Marshal of the Indian Air Force, he insisted till the end, and he gave statistics, he gave documentary evidence why this was victory for the Indian Air Force. It's no easy task destroying 123 enemy tanks, but that is what Indian Air Force did. Destroyed 123 Pakistani tanks and 72 ammunition trains. I want to cut across to my colleague Ashutosh Mishra for more on this big story and the farewell. A fitting farewell, Ashutosh, to a legend not just the Air Force but the country looks up to.
Well, indeed, Gaurav, this was not just ordinary, honor to India's brave Marshal Arjan Singh. This was extraordinary state honor to the late and brave air warrior. The mortal remains was taken in a gun carriage, and minutes ago, let me show you these visuals. These are the Air Force Special Band that gave the last salute to the brave Arjan Singh. The mortal remains have been taken in a gun carriage to the Brar Square of Delhi's cantonment. Outside the residence, tri-service contingent were here. They marched along with the mortal remains of Arjan Singh, and this is not, unlike the ordinary and traditional manner. The 4 top wing commanders of Air Force, they will lift the mortal remains of Arjan Singh, to give him extraordinary honor. The Prime Minister, President, and all dignitaries of this nation, they have mourned their death. MiGs and Sukhoi, they will conduct a fly past, a missing fly past for its, the airman Arjan Singh. That will be conducted. The national flag will be half-mast, and that is how India is mourning the death of its brave Air Marshal Arjan Singh. Gaurav?
Marshal of the Indian Air Force Arjan Singh. Prime Minister Narendra Modi led the nation. Of course, President Ramnath Kovind also visited 7A Kautilya Marg to pay his last respects. Now, my colleague Sudhir Ranjan Sen has filed this report.
The Tri-Services Guard waiting for the gun carriage of Marshal of the Air Force Arjan Singh. As you can see, first is lined up the Navy. If I can ask my camera to pan a little bit. After the Navy is the Indian Army, and then the Indian Air Force. It is through this road that the gun carriage is going to reach Brar Square. And as the gun carriage reaches, they will raise their weapons in a salute. And it is here that the last rites of the Marshal of the Air Force is going to be conducted. You're going to see a fly past of Sukhoi 30s, the mainstay fighters flying in a missing man formation, signifying that of a fallen comrade. And it is also befitting, perhaps, so to say, that the final rites of the Marshal of the Air Force is happening here, just next to a war cemetery, where veterans of the Second World War, the 65 war, are all there. If I can ask my camera to pan a little bit, that is the cemetery where the veterans are buried. At about 8:15, the gun carriage carrying the mortal remains of the Marshal of the Air Force is going to start from Kautilya Road, his residence, and make its way down this road. The Marshal of the Air Force joined the Royal Indian Air Force, then the Royal Indian Air Force, very early at the age of 19, saw action in the northwest frontier province, now in Pakistan, and earned his spurs in the Second World War in the campaign in Burma. Subsequently, he took over as a Chief of the Air Force in 1964, leading India to a comprehensive victory in the 1965 India-Pakistan War. With camera person Sanjeev Kumar, Sudhir Ranjan Sen for India Today.
In his condolence message, Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote, "Jandar, Shandar, Samarpit Jeevan, वीरता और शौर्य की जीती जागती मिसाल, ऊंचाई और गहराई का अद्भुत संयोजन, पद, प्रतिष्ठा, मान, मर्यादा सभी मां भारती के चरणों में समर्पित. This is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote in the condolence book at the Marshal's residence. I quickly want to cut across to my colleague Arjan Singh for more. Shudi, as the Prime Minister wrote, this actually was Marshal of the Indian Air Force Arjan Singh, Jandar, Shandar, Samarpit Jeevan.
But yes, I mean, Gaurav, I've heard very many people who serve the same mode, from contact to in terms of by anybody else than the Marshal of the Indian Air Force State. And for that, perhaps not only the Air Force, but across the services, he was a man that everybody looked up to. That is exactly why perhaps captured the imagination of the country. So, so strongly across the country, we are seeing morning stories coming out of Hindu news. Even yesterday, at his residence, so a lot really common people just coming in to pay their respect, say final goodbye to the Marshal of Arjan Singh. From where I am, I will ask very shortly, if I can ask the camera to pan a little bit. This is the road in which the gun carriage is going to come. And as you look at the side services guard aligned and ऐसे करूँगा going past.
It will very soon be on the ring road. This is the road leading to the ring road. It has been cleared for the Marshal of the Indian Air Force for his last journey. Fly in peace. He'd flown a very large number of aircraft in the inventory of the Indian Air Force from the 1930s till the time he retired from the Indian Air Force. But even after that, and that's one of the most remarkable aspects about his life. It's not that he did everything for the country only when he was in uniform. When he retired, almost 2 crore rupees, he sold off some land. 2 crore rupees he gave to the Indian Air Force out of his personal money for welfare of air warriors and their families and their next of kin, for the education of their children. This is how much he cared for the men he commanded while in service and even after he had retired. And this officer, this who thought India first all his life, it's a fitting farewell to him at this point of time. Shudi, the Indian Air Force will fly in the missing man formation, and that signifies how much our country will miss Arjan Singh and his leadership and his wise counsel to commanders till date. I'll come to Arjan Singh in just a moment, but you're seeing these live images of the gun carriage that's traveling through the streets of Delhi. This is the ring road. Marshal of the Air Force, even after he retired, he donated money for setting up of Center for Air Power Studies. Air wars decide victories in future. He felt that, and look at that image. Even at 95, even he passed away at the age of 95, but this is an image of some years ago. Even in late 90s, he would stand ramrod straight. He would rise to salute the tricolor and the Air Force flag. He followed protocol to the T. He attended every function he was invited to. He spoke about the importance of air power in our country, because that is what he said will decide victory in the times to come. I have former Deputy Chief of the Army Staff, Raj Kadian, Lieutenant General Raj Kadian, with me on the broadcast. General Kadian, here was one man who always thought India first. 2 crore of his own money, personal money, he donated for air power studies and for the welfare of air warriors, General Kadian.
Marshal of the Indian Air Force, Arjan Singh, lived and breathed the service culture. His donation of over 2 crore to the welfare of the retired airmen was part of that legacy. He was an icon in every respect, not only in physical fitness, as the panelists just said about standing ramrod state always with his tall frame, but also a model of grace, poise, elegance and dignity in whatever he did. He kept a low profile, one seldom heard of him in the press, but he had lived a full life. He left a legacy that will be hard to equal by many others. He inspired many of the young people to join the Air Force and contribute to the country's cause. Apart from being an icon in the Air Force and the defense services, he also made very valid contribution in the diplomatic field. He was our ambassador in Switzerland and then High Commissioner in Kenya, plus a member of the Minority Commission. He was also the Lieutenant Governor in Delhi. I think he would have gone away as a very satisfied man, having made all possible human contributions to the nation that anyone could aspire to do. So today is a very befitting state farewell for him. The national flag is flying half-mast. The defense services, particularly the Air Force, will give him all the ceremonial functions that will be performed, including the flypast by the fighters and giving the last salute to our hero, a national hero, and whole country is mourning his death. We pray for peace for his departed soul, and I hope some of us are able to learn and emulate the example set by Marshal Arjan Singh.
And sir, he was very clear. He was very clear. I had interviewed him when he became Marshal of the Indian Air Force on the 1965 war, and he insisted that it's flawed logic to say that 65 was a stalemate, that Indian Air Force did not do well. He had statistics to back every claim where he said India won the war and Air Force performed well, destroying 123 Pakistani tanks and 72 ammunition trains, as against only 3 of ours being destroyed by Pakistan Air Force. Jal Kadian.
I think the contribution by the Air Force in 1965 was unique. Air Marshal Arjan Singh, then Air Marshal, was the youngest Air Force officer to have become chief at the age of 44. He became Air Chief in 64 and led the Air Force at that young age. He stayed Air Chief 5 years. We should remember that time that Pakistan had superior aircraft than India. They had the Sabre jets, F-86. India did not have a matching aircraft. Their aircraft had air-to-air missile, which we did not have. We had a conglomeration of different older version aircraft.
Absolutely. Stay with me for a moment, General Kadian. Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak joins me, a military historian of repute, joins me on the broadcast. Air Vice Marshal Kak, how would you recall, Marshal of the Indian Air Force, Arjan Singh, insisting that India won the 65 war and air power played a decisive role? He told me that we destroyed 123 Pakistani tanks as against only 3 by then, and we destroyed 72 ammunition trains of theirs.
Gaurav, you have just studied this in great detail. I can only reiterate the result of a very massive analysis which was done at the Center for Air Power Studies. And there was a book taken out on that. Detail and in every parameter of flying, India won. But it is the graciousness of Marshal that he said it should have been an outright victory, like the kind which happened later in 1971. This is the first point. The second point is, I think we need to understand, the nation needs to understand, we had virtually a hopeless, our asymmetry in terms of throw weight and capability to deliver pain. In that asymmetry, it was Pakistani Air Force which was ahead of us in terms of aircraft, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of training levels. As everyone knows, the Americans helped the Pakistanis for over nearly 12 years. In fact, 11 years to be precise, in every aspect, and they concentrated on the Air Force. So the result was we went into that war with the military as far as India is concerned. Now, this is with the history of the Marshal, training levels. There is
I'm losing that audio link with Air Vice Marshal Kapil Kak, and we'll re-establish that link in just a moment. But Shruti, this is the military study that shows he was a very able military commander from a hopeless situation to absolute air power. This is what Marshal Arjan Singh had turned Indian Air Force into in 1965. Tremendous experience he had despite his young age. He was only 45 during the 1965 war. He was Chief of Air Staff, but we had air superiority despite Pakistan having superior aircraft.
I'll also go across to Colonel Ranveer Singh at this point. Colonel Singh, do you think that this is... Well, yes, and that is, what we've been underlining ever since, since the 50 years that this government decided to celebrate of the 1965 war, because initially, if you look at the history, there were some severe reverses that the Indian Air Force suffered, and that is not because of lack of fighting capability, but just because the kind of equipments that we were using Second World War aircrafts as against very, very modern, the Sabre jets, the US-made fighters that the US had been supplying Pakistan to. But after the initial, reverses that had happened in the first few days of the war, then it completely turned around. And it was, it is because of that the ground forces, the land forces, so to say, the Indian Army was able, and with jointness, I mean, today we talk about jointness as well, but then if you look at it, it was the jointness that came in and completely turning it around. And at the end of the war, we ended up capturing Pakistani territory. A few thousand square kilometers of Pakistani territory was with India, and that is what gave us the crucial edge when we finally went into negotiations. So to say that it was a stalemate, that is not a correct history, so to say, of the 1965 war. Gaurav.
Absolutely, 1965 was not a stalemate. It was India's victory over Pakistan. It could have been better, but the role of air power played a very decisive role in that victory. And Shruti, if we were to just, for a moment shift focus and see the difference, the last rites of Sam Manekshaw, the man who won India a very decisive victory in 1971, Bangladesh was born, his last rites, his funeral, and what's happening with Marshal of the Air Force Arjan Singh today. What a stark difference.
Well, yes, Gaurav, I mean, if you look at it there, it was a very controversial kind of, so to say, of last rites of a man. Perhaps, both, I mean, one Field Marshal, the other Marshal of the Air Force. The funeral that we saw of the Field Marshal some years ago, a few years ago, was quite controversial because ministers, government, not quite into it. This time we have seen a different change, a different attitude, so to say, in the government's approach to the entire thing, and which is why, in a very touching manner, I would say that we are going to see a flypast. It's a very befitting way to say goodbye to a man who literally saw the beginning of the Indian Air Force as the Royal Indian Air Force maturing into one of the most, potent weapons, so to say, in this part of the world. And this is the man that had seen the transition or was through the transition and had taken the force through. Very briefly, Gaurav, if I can ask my camera to pan a little bit, everything seems to be ready. We are going to see the gun carriage carrying the mortal remains of the Marshal of the Indian Air Force very, very soon through this park. By about 8 it should be here that we are going to see fly past a missing man formation here to signify a fallen comrade. Before that, we are going to see the the Mi-17 helicopters, the big heavy transport, heavy lift helicopters of the Indian Air Force carrying the tricolor, the Indian Air Force insignia before them. And after that, you're going to see the 21 gun salute, which is there in the which is going to be there before the final rites begin. Hosts of dignitaries already arrived, former chiefs of the Air Force, former chiefs of the Indian Army. They're all here, slowly trickling in, and as you can see, it's not very far away when the gun carriage is going to wind its way up through this road in Brar Square. Back to you, Gaurav.
Stay with me for a moment, Shruti. General Qadian, you know that aspect of the last rites of the man who won India a decisive victory in 1971 war, Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw, only Minister of State Defence Pallam Raju present. In contrast, the last rites of Marshal of the Indian Air Force, Arjan Singh. How do you see this, sir?
Gaurav, that remains a sore point with the defense services. India had won the first decisive war in 1971 in the last 1,000 years. And Manekshaw's personal contribution, his leadership played a vital role. And he should have been, he was the first person of the country to be accorded the rank of Field Marshal. A great honor to the man. But unfortunately, his last rite, although it was declared a state funeral, but people did not reach at the level they should have. I think only one of the vice chiefs reached there to attend the last rite. The politicians kept away, whether it was, the reason was administrative, that Kannur, where he was buried or he was cremated, was in a remote area, or the notice was too short, but all these could have been ended. I think it was a decision at the government level to kind of keep it a low-key affair. And that remains a sore point, that the services do feel that the hero did not get a deserving send-off, and the last rites could have been more appropriate. Gaurav, the contribution in the war you mentioned, war has many facets. From the Air Force point of view, Arjan Singh was absolutely right that it was a decisive victory. We had lost Sham in the first onslaught of the Pakistani attack, their Operation Grand Slam. And if the Air Force had not intervened in time, our Punch and Rajouri would have been totally cut off. We only had one bridge at Aknur at that time. It was the vital contribution made by the Air Force in halting that onslaught. And it is a matter of history. When Arjan Singh was finally called and asked, how long will you take to get the Air Force ready, he just said 2 hours. That means the man had already done the foresight, shown the foresight, done the foreplanning, and Air Force was ready. So I think Air Force contribution in saving Punch and Jorian sector from being cut off was absolutely critical at that time.
We will talk about this in greater detail. General Qadian, Air Vice Marshal Kak, Sudhir Ranjan Sen, stay with me for a moment. A quick break at this stage. In about 6 minutes from now, the mortal remains of Marshal of the Indian Air Force Arjan Singh will reach the Brar Square. We see several ex-chiefs of the air staff and their families already there.